Hey Enablers, Mike Kunkle here. Welcome to this episode of Sales Enablement Straight Talk entitled How to Apply Performance Thinking to Enablement. To do this, let's explore a common situation that senior sales leaders find themselves in, and then think through how we can best support them. First, take a look here at the revenue plan from the previous year and the FTE count and the previous quotas for reps. The previous revenue plan was 186 million. The average FTE for the year 155, which is the current count, and the previous quota per rep 1.2 million each. Here's how we ended the year. 155 million with those same 155 FTEs, which actually was 1 million per rep rather than 1.2. The revenue plan goal setting process varies from company to company, but in this case, the head of sales has been handed an increase of 25% with a new revenue plan set at 232.5 million. The hiring plan calls for an increase of 6.5% or 10 new sales reps. The plan is to front load them in the first quarter. Quotas have increased to 1.5 million. If you do the math, the actual number per rep needed to get to the new revenue plan is 1.4 million, but they hedged a bit to even it out at 1.5. Now, when you look at the increase or the net increase compared to the previous plan, it's 46.5 million. However, we didn't achieve that target. We achieved 155 million. So the net new compared to actual is 77.5 mil. Now let's look down at the rep, right? We said that the rep quota was now 1.5. Compared to the previous plan, that's a $300,000 increase or 25%. But compared to net new actual, it's $500,000 or a 50% increase in quota per rep. Pretty significant, right? One might think that this is fairly unrealistic, but this happens all the time. So now, if you look at the new revenue plan of 232.5, the split between new business development or new logos and internal account growth of the customer base is also pretty interesting. For new business development, 174.3 mil needs to come from the outside and 58 million comes from the inside. Now, when you compare to last year, this gets interesting, right? New business development, 62% of the revenue plan attainment last year came from new business development, 96.1 million. Account growth was 38% of the entire amount, or 58.9, and yet they still fell short 31 million compared to the actual compared to the quota. Now let's compare this to this year. New business development is now 75% of the new quota plan, and that is a $174.3 million number, which is an 81% increase. Account growth is roughly flat. In fact, a little under last year at 58,125. So you can see that this is significantly adjusted for new business development. This is quite an interesting scenario, right? Yet not all that uncommon. And this is actually built, at least based on something real that a client of mine went through. So there are some questions now to apply performance thinking that you can be asking yourself. First, what is the playbook for new business development? Is it even documented? Have you captured best practices, especially what do the top performers do who have the greatest degree of success with new business development. Have you done a top performer analysis? Are there best practices? This is one of the places that you want to take a close look at. Next, what's the playbook for account growth? This is actually just has to happen almost a little bit less than last year, but is still an important chunk of the plan. What are the top performer practices for that? And can any of this be offloaded, or can you create a specialist role of people who have really succeeded at this? And that may even include engaging customer success, or at least looking how much of the account growth last year was driven by a sales rep versus customer success or service versus some other way versus organic growth. Having an understanding of that will give you the opportunity to diagnose what the current state is and what needs to be or can be done differently to better support the sales force or ensure there's enough focus on this massive increase in new business development and new logos. Here's something that's critically important. Do you believe you have the level of buyer acumen required, a solid foundation, especially coin-op? What are the challenges they face, the opportunities they can enable, the impacts of either resolving or not resolving those challenges or opportunities, the outcomes they want to achieve, the priority of those outcomes, and the needs that bridge that current state and desired future state? Do you understand that for your most common buyers and buyer personas? And do you understand their buyer's journey and their exit criteria and decision criteria per stage in that journey by persona? Do you have the right ICP targeted then with lists created? Otherwise, there'll be a scramble and reps will be going in all different directions doing their own thing rather than focusing on taking action to drive new business development. One of the domino effects that spreads out from having solid buyer acumen is having great buyer engagement content. So you need to ask yourself, is the buyer engagement content that we have right and strong enough to generate interest, garner attention, and then especially help buyers make decisions that they feel good about? Is it inform them to resolve their buying process exit criteria by stage? And do you have that content built, and is it effective? Now we start to bring this together and think, what are the sales competencies that are required to achieve this new business development goal? Do you have the competencies laid out? Can you assess your current sales force against those competencies? Does this tie back to the playbook that you have in place for new business development based on top performer practices? This is how you're going to start to gauge where folks are and where they need to be and how you can do things to close that gap and develop them to the skill levels to drive this far higher degree of business in the new plan. In a situation like this, you're not going to be able to do a massive swap out, but you need to ask the question, do we have the right people in the right roles to achieve these far higher goals? And you can think about this in terms of context of new business development and account growth. You may be able to shuffle things around, create special teams, utilize people where they have strengths, or at least, as we're going to talk about with competencies, identify folks who have the largest gaps and create plans to support them. But one way or the other, you need to be thinking about right people, right roles. And for those 10 that you're going to hire, this is especially important to get it right and hire the right people for the roles given what they now need to accomplish. And then question 7 officially is, How does your current sales force stack up against those competencies, and what gaps should be closed to help them achieve these goals? This is where competency analysis comes in and where you must create plans to help close the gaps. And you'll also be hiring 10 new reps. So question 8 is, how will you ensure the 10 new reps will have the right sales DNA and the right competencies to plug into your situation? You also may need to reconsider some things about your onboarding as well, if onboarding didn't previously focus strongly on new business development. Now, we never want to hire someone who, just because they've got the right skills, and throw them to the wolves or say, go get them, tiger. So the onboarding may need to be shifted, but the better you can hire for these specific positions and the new focus, the easier it will be to onboard them and ramp them up to the levels of production that are necessary. And of course, we know that not much really happens in terms of change or performance without engagement with the frontline sales managers. So how are they prepared to hire, train, coach, and manage effectively to achieve this plan? What gaps exist for your frontline sales managers that you'll want to address as well? Finally, number 10, how do we best address gaps in the above while you're in motion? This is similar to changing the tires on a moving bus. And yes, it's something that we all face all the time as enablers, but it's especially critical in a situation like this. This is where crystal clear communication and expectation management is so important with your senior sales leader. They know that some things have to change to be trained, to be figured out, to help the team perform at a higher level. They're clearly aware of those numbers and what has to happen. They also can't stop the bus to allow you to make all of these changes to tune up the engine and then put the bus back in motion. So whatever you plan to do, work very closely with them and your frontline sales managers. Ensure top-down support. Get communication clear about what you're doing, why you're doing, and help the sales leaders, sales managers, and even the reps clearly see that the things that you're doing are in full support of the goals that they need to accomplish. The communication here is going to be especially important. Here are all of the questions, all together, all uncovered, so you can see them in totality. I hope this has been helpful to think through a real scenario that many senior sales leaders face, and of course many other enablers like you, and to think through, how do I know where to focus and why to focus, and what questions should I ask to see how I can best support the sales team in moving the needle on their skill sets that are aligned to the metrics that matter most in these higher quotas. This is how we do strategic enablement. This is how you make an impact. I hope this helps, enablers. That's it, enablers, for this edition of Sales Enablement Straight Talk. I want to make you aware that FFWD and Felix Kruger are having an end of fiscal year sale. It's 30% off on the building blocks of sales enablement learning experience, where you learn the types of things that we talked about here today. Take control of your career now. Visit bit.ly, BB of SE-EOFY, end of fiscal year, and learn how you can get the discount and explore the building blocks of sales enablement, learning experience, and certification. Stay the course, enablers. This is Mike Kunkle, and remember, make an impact with enablement.